And we are live. Welcome back. This is day 4, but it's day 3 of this week. But this is day 4 of Reboot and Thrive. Thank you so much for joining today. We're just so passionate right now with what everyone's going through. Everyone's at home, compression, going through a full reboot. How can we thrive now? My pleasure today is to introduce my audience to Vineet Prasad. I had a chance to meet Vineet in August of last year and get briefed on what he's doing with Savings Academy. And so, Vineet, I want to turn it over to you and give you a couple minutes to talk about who you are, what you do, and why you're passionate about it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here, chat with you, and I think this is a great idea to get people thinking about some of these things. Especially now is a great time to be thinking about both health and the wealth side of things. So my background, I worked in the tech industry for quite a long time. I'm based in Mountain View, California, so sort of the central hub of tech, and most recently at Facebook, doing analytics and some product management. And then I've always had a strong passion for personal finance, and I've helped people kind of on the side for fun with really figuring out how to spend effectively, be able to save for their goals for the future. And I had so much fun doing that and enjoyed it and was able to help a lot of people that I turned it into a business. And now it's what I do full time, both the one-on-one coaching for young tech professionals, as well as creating content to help people really figure out that fundamental, and for me, critical piece of personal finance, which is really making sure that you're saving, that you're spending intentionally, so that you can do all the other awesome stuff like investing, like real estate, like the things that you do, Christopher.
That's right, and that's why I thought is so important to get you on this week, as we're really talking about, this is the week where we're focused on building wealth. And both you and I really serve in and speak into the tech community, because that's where we came from, that's where we spent our career. And we realize that in the tech community, there's a lot of things that are unique about it. People get the opportunity to make a lot of money, and that's in cash and bonuses and equity compensation. And sometimes they can really, people can start spending as much as they're earning. And so let's talk for a quick second. What do you see are the biggest spending traps that tech employees and entrepreneurs tend to fall into?
Yeah, great question. I think you nailed it when you said that for every level of income, there's a lifestyle or a level of expense that will make it all go away. I've worked with folks that have, very, very high incomes, that at first, we see all of it's going out every month. And I think there's a couple main traps that I think people fall into. One, and this is probably not surprising for folks, but one is kind of the status game, if you will. And it manifests a little bit differently in the tech world than maybe it does in New York or other places. People maybe aren't as much buying the super nice suits because it's tech, but the highest end, Model S, or the big house in the really, really nice top end kind of area. And I think whenever making any financial decision, I think it's really critical, or spending decision, I think it's really critical to ask yourself, are you doing this because it will create a lot of value for you and it's aligned with your values, it'll make you happy in a long-term basis, or because it's something that you want to use to impress people? And there's a lot of information. My background, I studied economics and psychology and did some behavioral economics research in college. And there's a lot of behavioral economics studies that actually show that when people self-report their happiness, something like getting a really nice new car actually spikes your happiness for a period of about 2 weeks. People self-report that their happiness increases, and then it very consistently goes back to normal, where it was before. And that's a concept known as the hedonic treadmill. The idea that when you get these big spikes, and this is a well-documented in psychology and economics concept, you get these big spikes in happiness and then you go right back to where you were before. And then you want the next thing, right? Of course. And we're all subject to this. Marketing is a $600 billion industry for a reason, advertising, right? We have to learn, we're kind of taught to see that there's these shiny things. So I think that's trap number one, is kind of not, making purchases as status symbols. I think number two is we're in a world now where a lot of services have turned from one-off purchases to subscriptions. And I almost every client that I work with, we do a deep audit into that, where we look at everything that they're subscribed to. And there's usually some stuff that is not being used. So recurring expenses are the most dangerous kind of expenses because they hit you every single month. And so I would just say, like, being on top of that, knowing what those are, and regularly kind of auditing that. And the third one I'd say is that I see, especially for tech professionals where I am in the Bay Area and in kind of some of those tech hubs, like the eating out, the dining out budget is usually, and the thing is, like, with all of these things, I don't judge if someone is saying, like, this is really in line with my values and this is what I want to spend. Great. If you're able to make it work in your spending plan, that's awesome. But I think what a lot of people are just shocked. We talk about how much they want to be spending in an area, and then they're shocked at how much they actually are. So I find, kind of that's an area where a lot of people may be really surprised at how much they're spending. And I was, when I started doing this kind of spending tracking with myself as well.
Now with the current environment, and so where, maybe, I don't know how it is in the Bay Area. I think deliveries here in Austin are down. People are eating more at home and stockpiling. I think, and this is where, when we think about the opportunity to start saving now and stockpiling cash now, and thinking about what you said, do you think that people are more at a risk right now, maybe because they are, isolated and alone, that they may go on and make bigger purchases right now? Or do you think that part of a crisis is everyone naturally starts thinking about stockpiling, cash?
That's a great question. I've seen, the people I work with, like, we've usually been really kind of focused on some like best practices and stuff. So I see most of those people moving in the second direction, like moving towards, hey, like, this is actually a great opportunity to, do a lot of the socializing virtually and like make food. Like, we all like have a dinner party where, we're all, it's a virtual one, or, and people really practicing, like getting better at things like meal prepping or just being frugal in a way that makes them happy. I wouldn't be surprised though if there are a lot of folks going the other way. And I think especially, a lot of folks who maybe if you get your meals from like a Google or Facebook or one of those big tech companies, and you hadn't gotten used to kind of meal prepping, I definitely know software engineers, friends of mine who don't have anything in the fridge. Like, they literally, it's just eat at the tech company on the weekdays, and on the weekends, just order delivery. And if you're ordering delivery for 21 meals a day, a week, then that could get super expensive, super fast.
Yeah.
So I would say, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm making a plug for next week. I'm bringing in somebody who has run for many years a cooking school and catering company, who's going to show people how do they plan meals for the week. So that's when we think about living well, make sure that everyone is aware of that, because that's something we all need. We've made this hard shift, and now it's like, oh man, got to cook. But yeah, I think getting back to that question, and starting to think about, what we want to leave people with, and I want to get into how do we start, analyzing spending and creating budgets here in a second. But you're talking a little bit about mindset, what to be aware of. What would you then, caution people, or what would you encourage people to do, just at that highest level, to say, okay, watch this in your spending right now, because this is where you may be inclined to, react and not really think about it and respond, right, in regards to your goals?
That's a good question. So typically the number one thing I would say, like in this area, is probably food. But And I'd say still. So I think that next week, if people are able to tune into that talk, I think that's huge,
Yeah.
because obviously it's critical for your health, but also like just with delivery fees right now, that could get really super out of control and make
Mm,
it so you can't save up for your future goals and start cash flowing if
yeah.
you're not eating in a economical way, and a healthy way as well. So I'd say that's the number one thing right now for people to watch for, and then yeah.
And so then let's start talking about, so here we are. And when I talked about on Monday, I talked about 5 strategies to build wealth now. I took a page from your book, and this is something that we both agree in, is now is the time to do the deep dive in all of your expenses and your spending. And so what is, you've seen this, you've done this a ton. What's the best and easiest way to start tracking your spending?
Sure, a great question. So personally, I really like, and I work with a lot of clients in this, spreadsheets, because they're very customizable. If you are comfortable with spreadsheets, my number one recommendation, there's a service called Tiller, and I'm not associated with them in any way, but I really like them. I use them with a lot of clients. They are, it's a Google Sheet based tool where they'll pull all your transactions into Google Sheets on a daily basis, and then you can go in at the right cadence for you. Which I'd say for folks that are really struggling with this stuff,
Yeah.
and if it's new to you, and you're like, hey, if you realize I'm not where I want to be in terms of saving for the future, paying down my debt, then I would say you want to check in on that weekly. And it will only
Yeah.
take you, once you have the system set up, it should only take 10 minutes a week to just like go in, say, oh, this is what all these things were, put them in the buckets, look at where you're doing. And that awareness is half the battle. Honestly, it's super critical. And people honestly make a lot of changes just based on being aware. I mean, I think it's similar with
Mm,
say eating, right? Like health, and like say losing weight, for example.
right.
Like if people start tracking what they're eating, that is a huge, even just the act of tracking ends up making you move in line with your values more. So I'd say that's a good idea. But on top of Tiller as a spreadsheet tool, if you're not a spreadsheet person, then, and if you like being able to do things on your phone,
Yeah.
there's two ones I use with people. One is called YNAB, which is an acronym for You Need a Budget. And
Mm,
I tend to work with people in YNAB if they're very detail oriented and they want to have a really clear picture of their finances and be able to put money in different buckets and sort of
yeah.
uh, plan very specifically. A lot of people who I work with who are software engineers really like this because it's like a
Right.
very precise tool for planning out all of your future expenses and
Wow.
making sure you're funding those in these various buckets. And it's a nice, they have an app. Both Tiller and YNAB have a yearly subscription or yearly fee, which I think is worthwhile in terms of the amount that you reduce in your spending naturally by tracking. But there is also a free tool, probably one that you and a lot of other people have heard of, which is Mint.
Right.
By Intuit, that's the simplest one. So if you don't like spreadsheets and you want a more simple solution, I would use Mint. Again, it's an aggregator, so you can tie in all your banks. It pulls in your information. All you have to do is that once a week or once a month. I'd say once you get to the point where you're really comfortable with your saving how much you want regularly, I still recommend checking in on it once a month and seeing how
Right.
things are changing. That's what my wife and I do every month. This Friday, we do like the first Friday
Every
of every
month.
month. We're going to be doing it Friday evening this week. So Mint is also, those are the three tools I most highly recommend.
So then, and great advice. And I think I heard you say something, and I know it's true, that if you track it, you can start understanding how does that align to really what you want to do. Because sometimes we are, heads down, we're thinking about projects and programs, we're walking in and out of blue bottle coffee, swiping our credit card for friends. We have to focus on that. if somebody was doing an expense review this weekend, what would be the 2 areas that you would say, or 3 areas that you would say, look here, because this is where I see commonalities? What I heard earlier was, food and subscriptions. Would you modify that, or are those the top 2? What would you look at?
Yeah. Question. I'd say those are definitely 2 key ones. But in addition, so with the subscriptions, what I'd very specifically do the first time you're ever doing it, I would actually list them out somewhere, like either make another sheet if you're using Tiller, like in the spreadsheet, or you can just write them out in a Google Doc, like all the ones that are continuous, and make sure you're actually using them. And then if you live with a partner, I think it's really, really essential to do this together. If one thing I find, I work with a lot of couples, and couples are going to talk about money one way or the other, right?
Right.
And the one way, which is what I encourage people to do, is to do it proactively. Do it once a month, or the beginning once a week, really quickly, and then eventually once a month, once you've graduated to that. And those proactive conversations, sometimes they're a little challenging. Sometimes people have different priorities, and sometimes they're like, oh, you're spending a lot on clothes. Well, you're spending too much on the boat, or but it's better to have those conversations in a more proactive way. Otherwise, you will still talk about money. It'll just be in a much more, it'll come up at the difficult times. It'll come up at the high intensity times.
And then those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. So I would say have those proactive conversations. And so in addition to the subscriptions and food, I would also say thinking about, I bucket expenses into 3 different, types, like philosophically. There's your recurring. So these are going to be the same on a monthly or yearly basis. Like, it's very easy to predict them. They're your day-to-day. Exactly.
Like all that stuff should be the same. So you have your same.
Yeah. So like if you're imagining a line graph, or a graph of like expenses over time, like on a yearly basis, those are going to be very consistent. Then you have your day-to-day, which are much more spiky up and down. But the thing that really gets people, like, that they miss, is what I call planned expenses, which are the things like, vacations, or if you owe, like if you're a small business owner or you have a side hustle and you're going to owe taxes, or big things like that are big chunks that are more irregular. Another great example is like auto repairs, home repairs. So for those, I'd say you want to take a look back over like a year-long period and figure out what's typical for you. Or if you don't have the ability to do that, just start keeping track of those, and making sure that, because it's very easy to budget for the first 2 types. Like obviously it's very easy to budget for like rent, utilities and stuff, and then dining out and groceries, you can get a pretty good sense of. But trying to figure out what are those big expenses that you do, and then build those into making sure, like, okay, it's pretty simple. You start with your income, you do the recurring expenses, you look at the day-to-day, and then you also like try to figure out the plan, and you see what you have left at the end, which is what you truly is your cash flow that you have, your savings that you have to put away. But the thing is, I think people make a mistake that they miss those planned expenses, like the vacations, like the big things. And then they don't end up having anything at the end of the year once those.
That's a good thing to review. I want to be sensitive to time. I know we have 11 minutes left. I want to cover a couple more topics very quickly, but we have Saket Kumar. He asked, is it okay to share your banking details with the apps that you mentioned? And what would your approach be?
Yeah, that's a good question. And hi, Saket. Thanks for joining and listening in. Hope you're doing well. So that's a really good question. And I do talk to people about if they're uncomfortable. Like I take a look usually at the encryption kind of standards for the tools that I use, and I'm fairly confident in them. Of course, hacking is a reality, is a possibility today. So I personally am comfortable with it, but with people I work with, I give them the option. I think if you don't want to do that, then you can like pull CSVs or spreadsheet files from your various banks once a month.
Right.
To make that easier, maybe just have one main spending account, whether that's a credit card or a debit card that you spend out of, and then just drop that into a spreadsheet once a month.
Right, do that. So I mean, that's what I'm hearing is get comfortable if you can with the bank's encryption. I always advocate for people to have personal VPNs as well. That really sort of helps manage that traffic in and out. And then, you know, the other alternative is to download and manage spreadsheets. So I'm going to hit on a couple heady topics, and I want to keep us light here, or nimble in moving forward. And so this is, you know, what do people do right now if they have student debt or they have some credit card debt, and now they're impacted? I think that the good news is in all of this is a lot of tech employees are still employed, right? Are still working and are still earning. However, this is an environment where we're now, everyone's looking at a lot of debt. What would you recommend right now?
Sure. So if you can continue to, you know, pay off if your job is continuing, definitely continue to pay off your debt. But one thing to know is that for student loans right now, they've deferred interest through, I don't recall the exact date, but for a significant period of time. I think while the virus is affecting us, that'll be deferred. So if you need to, you can, you know, decrease or pause on those payments as long as your specific types of loans qualify. I believe public loans do, private loans don't. But the other thing you can do on credit cards, and I think a lot of people don't realize, is you can negotiate on your rates. You can call up the bank and you can say, hey, I'm at a 25% interest rate. You know, I'm struggling to make payments or pay off my balance comfortably. You know, can we do a 10% rate? And, you know, then they'll negotiate. But those are negotiable. And the other option that you always have on credit cards is a balance transfer card. There is a set fee. So if you're, say, transferring $10,000, that is at 25% interest onto a balance transfer card, you might get 3 or 5% right there charged to you as a fee. But then you'd have 18 months or 12 months to at 0% interest, where you can pay that down faster. The thing there is you want to make sure that you really are paying that off, not just, you know, playing the transfer to transfer game, because otherwise you'll keep having that debt and you'll keep being hit by the balance transfer fees every time you move money.
So getting back to is there an opportunity with the student loan, if what I heard you say is that they're letting you defer interest payments? Is there a way that students could then still actually pay into the principal during that time if they have the money, and then they can actually then leverage this as an opportunity to take those full payments, hit the principal, and then coming out the back end, you know, they're decreasing their overall, you know, debt, if that will. Yeah.
Yep, you nailed it. Yep. Right now, your payments you do make. So if you have any outstanding interest, like if you hadn't paid the interest from last month, it'll first hit interest. But then after that, all the payments you make are straight to principal. So I recommend to folks if you can continue to make the same payments, and that's just going to mean because it's going straight to principal, your loan's going to disappear a lot faster.
And so then getting to the final topic. So I think everyone, you know, and we'll do a recap at the end of what we discussed, but what would you recommend right now for emergency savings fund? Right here we are in these unprecedented times. A lot of tech has gone remote. People are still working. What is your recommendation to your audience we can share of what's the size and scope of a emergency savings fund that you should be thinking about right now?
Sure. So first of all, I do really believe everyone should have one, and I do believe it should be separate from your checking account. To have a savings fund, like a high interest savings account. There's a lot of good providers out there. There's Ally, Barclays, Goldman Sachs has one called Marcus. There's a number of good where you're getting more than the 0.01% you get at the big banks like Chase and Bank of America. But that still have FDIC protection, so that if you lost if the bank went under, you still are insured up to $250,000. I I think, you know, the general rule of thumb that you may have heard before is 3 to 6 months in
Right.
expenses. I think that's a good rule, and I tend to recommend that people are closer to the 6 months. The way I would think about it though is a little bit more nuanced, which is what is that emergency fund for? You have to be really clear
Yeah.
about that. And I break it up into two different components. One is the unemployment fund. Sorry, the emergency fund is made up of, I'd say, the unemployment fund, which is literally if I lost my job, my source of income, for how long could I pay my expenses? And for that, I would base it on how confident are you that within X number of months you could completely replace your income. And I think if, for some people, the answer might be 3. For some people, the answer might be 6. I think it depends on how confident you are in your reemployability. But there's another fund, and for a lot of people, I recommend actually having this separate. So actually having 2 savings accounts. If you're really disciplined about it, you can keep them together, and you're sure you won't dip into the unemployment fund. Is what I call a revolving savings account, and that's much more. If you struggle to, if you find that when the big expenses come, like vacation or big tax payments, that suddenly the money is not there, and you're like, oh shoot, do I have to sell some of my stock for this, or do I have to like put this all on a credit card? I would say like calculating what those big payments are. Let's say it's vacation, it's estimated tax, and like if there's a once a year like big gift that you buy for a parent or a spouse, like figuring out what those are annualized, dividing them by 12, and then just putting that much money every month into the revolving savings account. And then knowing that when you make that big expense, you pull it back out. I find that's helpful because then you're not surprised by those things.
I'll tell you, one of the things that we would do is, because we get, bonus, we get salary bonus stock, and we get some of the RSUs that would be coming in, and you get the bonus and the RSUs would be coming in quarterly, is then we would actually, try and get the salary to cover those main expenses and maybe a little bit extra. But then when those other dollars came in, those just went straight to those other accounts. And so that's one of the things I just want to say, because understanding our audience and how you guys get compensated and how you manage each of those, there's a way to do that where you can put it on automatic, and then you're watching and reviewing and seeing that stuff grow, but you are taking it out of, your main place. And I'm a huge advocate of live within the paycheck. Your bonus and whatever equity comp goes to savings or goes to investment. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Yep, you absolutely nailed it. I think the one nuance I'll add on top of that is if you are able to also get those planned expenses into the paycheck, that's great. So if your paycheck, it represents the recurring expenses, the day-to-day, and those planned expenses, because those will hit regardless of whether you get a bonus. Even though in tech you almost always get a bonus, but you nailed it. If you can, we were the same. Stephanie, my wife, and I, when we both worked in tech, it was the 100% of the bonus pretty much went straight to our like investment growth kind of accounts.
Right. And so then, closing off on that real quickly, are you advocating right now for, an extra savings account to get ready for a buy? I know that, for somebody who does, think about, index funds and other things, and we're looking at the discount that we have in front of us, is that something that you're advocating for right now?
Sure. So I don't specialize in the investment side, but what I do personally is kind of more the dollar cost averaging approach, where I'm just consistently investing regularly, and that's what I'm continuing to do. I would say for real estate, I do definitely recommend having I think a separate account. Again, you might end up with a few accounts here, but I think physically separating money can be really helpful, or digitally separating money. For what's the purpose. And I say for real estate, having that account that is growing towards whether it's your first down payment or your rental real estate. And if you're, I'd say if you're looking to buy soon, of course, in this market, this downturn has shown this, you want that to be in something short term. You want that to be in
Right.
something that's readily, if you're actually in the market, you're looking ready to buy. That should be liquid and ready to go.
Right. It should be liquid, right? And I think that's the other thing, is advocating for that. So I know we're at the bottom of the hour. I want to be sensitive to your time, Vineet. I really appreciate it. But to recap to everyone, I think that, first and foremost, now's the time to look at your expenses. If you listen back, Vineet gave, some of his tips of Tiller, YNAB, and you could also do Mint, some options to look at. Be sensitive as far as security with your bank account, and really focus right now on your food, your subscriptions, and then, as he talked about, what was the term that you used
Those
for that?
planned expenses, those kind of
Planned
spiky
large
ones.
expenses. And I know exactly what you're talking about. These big lumpy things that come, maybe that you are planning for a vacation, or maybe you pay your car insurance once a year. All of those things that don't streamline into a month over month. Plan that, but go through now, cull through there. I think we also talked about, from a debt perspective, now's the time to negotiate. Look at your student loans, look at your credit cards, and lean in, understand what's available. Because if you still are employed, leverage now to get ahead on your student loans and start hitting that principal and taking some chunks out of that. At the same time, if you have credit card debt, now is the time to negotiate. Credit card companies don't want people to default. They want you to keep paying, and you can negotiate for a lower rate, or you can actually look for some of those rollover credit cards. Those are huge values. And I also know that right now is the time too, where credit card companies will give you those rollover cards with, sometimes they'll waive that, 2 or 3% fee. It's a very interesting time right now. And I think 3 is, keep savings, focus on the savings, set up the different accounts, and be very disciplined. And I think, thinking about adding more to your savings, whether that's the unemployment fund or whether that's the investment fund, which, I would very much advocate for, is, start putting away those dollars, because we are going to turn the corner here at some point, and we're going to be in a buyer's market. And this is going to be the opportunity to buy, whether you're buying, stocks in the market at a low, or whether you're buying real estate as a low. The opportunity is going to be upon us before you know it. And that's the purpose of Reboot and Thrive, so that we're not stuck right now. We're actually moving forward. So thank you so much, Vineet. I appreciate everything. I know my audience does. Thank you for the question. Socket, shout out to you. And any parting words that you'd like to give?
I think just the one biggest takeaway is the number one thing you can do is start tracking your spending in some regard. Awareness is 100% the key. It's half the battle. It's everything. And it might sound scary or not fun, but it actually, I find it becomes fun over time. It becomes a bit of a game. And so I'd say that's the number one thing, if you can take one thing away from today. And thanks everyone. And thanks, Socket, for your question.
And yeah, and I would actually encourage everyone to follow Vineet, because Vineet is somebody who makes following savings fun and gets you focused on your cash flow and saving money. And we all need to have that mindset. That's the shift, and we need to have it now. Thank you so much for joining Reboot and Thrive. Tomorrow at the same time, noon Pacific time, 2 Central time, and 3 Eastern time. Let's not forget our East Coast people. We will be having John V join us from Agent Risk, who's going to be talking about what are steps that you can take now to really help out your portfolio that may have taken a beating, but you can actually turn the sad face into a smiley face. Okay, thank you so